Alrighty, welcome back everyone to the Good, the Bad, and the Sacred podcast. We are really excited to be coming back to share with you all today, joined by my lovely co-hosts and good friends, Brandon and Levon. How are you guys doing? How is life? How are things?
Doing well, thank by the grace of God. Went to church today, family, every day, every day at work, and struggles here and there. But thankful for that. Thankful for that. Get to see that guy every day at work too, which is beautiful.
Hey, love that. Love that. Awesome. Brandon, how about you?
Things are going good. We're living life. Work is work. I'm still plugging away on my schoolwork, so that keeps me pretty busy. But yeah, life is good. Things are going well.
Nice. That's awesome. Check in for me. Things have been pretty good. I'm going to be giving a CPE didactic one of these days. Basically, like an education session on pediatric palliative care chaplaincy to my old CPE, my old chaplain educator, in about a week or two. So that'll be pretty cool. I'm really excited for that. That'll be fun. Something a little bit different, but also I'm really excited to be able to share the work that I do and get to meet new students who are hopefully eager and excited to learn and keep growing. So all good things, all good things. Awesome. Well, so good to be with you guys again. So for today's episode, one of the things I've really been reflecting on lately is this topic of enculturation. And I think for me, it's really like recognizing how in the US, we are so uniquely diverse and just ethnically different within our own populations. And pretty much anywhere across the world you go, you're going to meet probably somebody who is either not from here or identifies with a different culture, heritage, tradition that is different from you. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is in all of this enculturation, there are certain common values or certain aspects that I think we find within our own work in the hospital. I think one of the things that's most obvious is when people come to a hospital, whether you're American, whether you're someone from a different place, at the end of the day, you want healing, you want care, you want support, you want all of these things. But then also at the same time, I think one of the things we encounter is people are different, right? And the way that that is expressed or the way that is sought out or the way that that is wanted can always be a little bit different or unique with the different populations we encounter. So I thought today would be really fun. Like, what does enculturation look like within our world? What does enculturation look like within our work within the hospital as chaplains? But then also like the blessings, the challenges, and then also looking at like what are the possible ways our listeners can go about interacting with people who are different from them within their own communities, within church, within whatever setting you're looking at. How do I really show that love to my neighbor that is different from me in a way that God might be calling me to? So today we're going to try to explore that and go through that a little bit. One of the first questions I came up with today is like, if you guys had to guess off the top of your heads, probably how many countries or how many places have you encountered like different people from different places? Yeah, this one I did not send this to the team to the boys today, so this is actually a random one. But I love it. Like, what do you think in your head if you had to like guesstimate it? What do you think?
So, are we saying cultures or countries?
Ooh, you can do both actually. I'd be interested.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't. That's a great one. Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I feel like a good chunk of people from South America and Central America with my work. Also in the Caribbean, I feel like I've met a good chunk of people. I've met some Europeans, which was really fascinating, and some Africans. I'd say maybe like probably upwards around like 20, 25 people of like different nations. Um, I'm going to incorporate like nations and cultures in the same aspect because in my head, off the top of my head, I can't separate the two, but I'm going to go with that. About 20, 25. How about you
That,
guys?
that, that's a decent number. I think I can go with that. I think I have interesting things to talk about it when you asked that question. One popped out,
Oh, good.
and
Okay.
I think I told Brandon about it when it was a language within a country. It was Mexico, and they spoke this Aztec language,
Oh, wow.
and they're obviously usually there's Spanish translators like immediately because that's the most sought out one.
Mhm.
And then the Spanish translator's like, wait, let me get that. I don't know if we have that. And it was like this, there was like three levels of it. I forget the language now. I forget what, but it's from Oaxaca.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then they said they spoke a middle one. And they're like, we have no translators for this language. I was like, lady,
No.
yeah. But I have, like you said, experienced people from South America, in my with hospice experience as well. People from Scandinavia,
Hmm.
some from Greece, uh, Thailand, some Buddhists, some Hindus from India or Bangladesh or Pakistan. Different. That's like a safe thing to say. Like that kind of covers everything. I had some from the Middle East, a couple from different places in Africa. I mean, you get a wide. I think all three of us can say we get a wide. We have been through a wide range of interactions with people from different cultures, different languages, different faiths, etc. You know, everything that encapsulates inculturation.
For sure. Absolutely. Brandon, how about you?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely, high teens, low 20s is somewhere where I would put it. Um, I mean, with, working in a level one trauma center, I think we get a lot of different people coming, just because of the surgeries that we offer and depending on what they need. We live in a very global world these days where people will travel for those things. Especially if a hospital has a certain specialty or something. Um, so yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely different culture, different languages, different faiths. Um, yeah. And we had a very similar situation to Levon. It was in the PICU in the pediatric ICU, and one of the parents, she spoke Mayan,
Wow.
and same kind of situation. Translator, we didn't have that translation.
Huh.
They tried to get close with some more like and Manny, you can probably explain this better than what I can, but it was like a more ancient Spanish, like not your modern
Mm.
dialect that like is spoken currently, but they went back a couple to see if they could get close, and I think they did an okay job, but still, we are at the mercies of technology and what they can and cannot provide. And with the world that we live in, there are so many different languages, and within those languages, there are so many different dialects. They're not going to have all of them. Um, and that really bites sometimes, but it's also the nuances of what we do, to try and enter very touchy, very, sacred moments, but then there's the human aspect of that sometimes we're just gonna run into roadblocks.
Mhm, mhm. No, for sure. Man, you guys have like, it's so funny. Like, these languages that I think most of society would think, oh, they're probably dead or, gone or just pages of history. No, they're still alive to this day. We encounter them, and
They are.
at
I
the
mean,
end of the
especially if
day,
you're, working because like we're at a level one. I'm at a level one trauma center. It's a port city, so like there's cruise ships leaving and
mm,
people fly in from all over the world to take a cruise. And like this one time, I mean, it was London, so it was English, so that wasn't necessarily the problem. But they flew in, and the patient, had a heart episode, and so he didn't get on the boat. The patient came to Tampa General,
yeah,
and now the family and the patient are here for getting heart surgery for probably a week, maybe more.
Yeah.
And now, social work and case management have to step in and, get them a temporary stay, on their passport, because now things have got to change because they're not here for vacation. Now they're here for, a surgery. And how do we handle that with insurance? What are we doing? What are we not doing? Like, it's a scramble, but you kind of learn to scramble well. You really learn to think on your feet quite well when you work in the type of environments that we do.
Oh, for sure. For sure. No, 100%. And I think, like, my next question, honestly, you guys have been hitting at it pretty well so far, I think, with some of those things. But, like, what for you all you've noticed whenever you've interacted with people who, are different from you, that they are of a different culture, background, whatever it might be. Like, what have you noticed is unique to them, like maybe some characteristics or features? Like, what is it about those interactions, what maybe an interaction that stuck out with you particularly that has been meaningful to you? Actually, I want to start on this one because one that comes to my mind immediately, where I'm living right now, we actually have a large population here of Pashto speaking people. I had never heard of Pashto, and I remember when my team was explaining Pashto to me, I said, "What is Pashto?" Like, they looked at me kind of funny because they were like, "What do you mean you don't know what that is?" And I'm like, "I never encountered that before." And essentially, what it is in the Middle East. I believe it was
Afghanistan.
Yeah, Afghanistan, exactly. There was a population of people that basically speak like almost like a derivative of Arabic, but it is different. Like, it's not the same. And essentially, these people, many of them that have come here to the U.S., they assisted the U.S. military at the time when the U.S. military was there doing operations and things. A lot of them helped as or help to interpret different messages or trying to support the military's operations in those areas. And to essentially thank them and honor them for their support and work with the U.S. military, many of them were able to come over to the U.S. and be here. Because of that, in our area where I am now, we actually get a number of those patients that come in, Pashto speaking. Why do I bring this culture up particularly? What's been really interesting is I remember it didn't actually affect me. It was one of the nurses on my team. We had a perinatal death happen for this one Pashto speaking family. And with Muslim culture families, typically whenever a baby or, in this case, an infant passes away, typically, as is associated with Muslim culture, they will within under 24 hours, they will go take the baby, perform like a proper ceremonial ritual essentially for that baby, and then properly place it in, bury the baby within about 24 hours, if time permits and if all the situations allow it. That's typical for Muslim culture. Well, it was really interesting because for this mom and dad, after they delivered and after the ceremony was conducted and everything was done, the mother had to remain in the hospital to receive her proper care and support before she could discharge. And what was really interesting is this nurse shared with me, when she went in to go check in with the family, they actually brought in like traditional, almost like a traditional meal or lunch into her room. So they had all this like proper like dining ware, like it was metal. It had all of like their traditional custom foods. Like, it looked as if they were entering like almost their home in a way, getting ready for a meal. And I remember the nurse shared with me, she was so caught off guard by this because she'd never seen anything like it. Like, who essentially brings in a picnic to the hospital, essentially, is the idea. And what was beautiful, what was so cool, was when she went and visited and checked in, this family said, "Please come join us. We actually want you to dine with us." That's part of our culture, is we believe in this aspect of community, and we love to share, and we want people to partake. And it was funny because she was joined with another nurse at the time. She herself, my team member, she was like, "Oh, absolutely, I would love to." But this other nurse was petrified because this is exotic food for her. This is something different. She's a little nervous and squeamish about that kind of thing, but she went in and sat down anyway. And I think the nurse told me she tried like the tiniest little bit of something to show like essentially peace, like to show she was like accepting, but at the same time she was like, I just can't do this, and had to leave. But to me, that is like one of the coolest things is I have never, with any quote unquote American patient, have seen that gesture of community before, where they are just like, I want you to dine with us, like I want you to be a part of this moment with us right now and join in. And I just thought to me, I'm like, what a cool cultural expression that even amidst this grief and this loss and this struggle, you guys want others to partake with you. Like that was just so beautiful to me. So just something there, like community sharing, I think was something that like impacted me when I heard that story and thought it was just so appropriate for today. How about you guys? Anything stick out for you all? It doesn't have to be meal sharing. It could be something meaningful that you guys remember, something that stuck out. It doesn't even have to be positive necessarily.
One of the things that sticks out to me is, so like the hospital is already for patients a very, how do we say this? Like power stripping place, if that makes sense. Like, you don't get a door that locks, a lot of times when you have your own room, you're not even wearing your own clothes, you know, all these things that like we consider to be part of our personality or personhood, or that's just part of who we are today, kind of gets dialed back, sometimes a lot. And when you're of a different culture or when you're of a different language, I think that hits even harder. Because right now, we have a family at the hospital that speaks only Arabic. They don't speak English at all. And so, that just adds to the nuances of all of the things that we are doing, that we have to, interpret and help them understand and cross that language barrier to, try and mitigate or help or heal or whatever it is that we're doing. And so I think it takes a already problem and it just makes it so much more profound in my mind, because I could see how powerless I would feel if my loved one or if my child was in the bed and they're hurting and they're sick or they need surgery, and now I can't even understand what the medical team is trying to tell me without the assistance of technology. And what if that technology is not working? What if the hospital loses Wi-Fi? Like, there's all these things that can and do happen sometimes. So I guess that's what sticks out to me is I think it makes the powerlessness even more profound in a lot of ways. And then us as chaplains, how we try to figure out how to accommodate them, and to bring, like a Spanish Bible when they're Spanish speaking, or a Quran in Arabic, when a Muslim family, needs that, or, or even trying to figure out ways how we can advocate, like we have the guides of rosary in English. Well, do we have those in Spanish? Are we going to have, and I know at some point we can't have all of our documentation in every language, but I do think that we should really consider what are the top spoken languages in the world and try our best to accommodate those when we can, and allocate resources for those things. So that's what I would say, how it really shows up for me is it's an extra step of powerlessness or maybe disenfranchisement or whatever words you want to attach to that you think works. But it's definitely something that makes everybody's job more difficult. It's because we have to figure out how we're going to work around this, and we're going to work around it because we want to care for that person well, but it's another step we've got to take. And then for the patient, it's difficult for them too, because they've got to be patient with the translation and the words that are coming and the breakdown in the communication that is going to invariably happen because we're using a third party, iPad to pull that off. And it requires a lot of work and a lot of patience on everybody's part. And when you don't feel good, you just don't feel good. And that sometimes you make patient when you don't feel good, like you're just not. And yeah, that's how it comes through for me.
Yeah, Brandon, the word that came to my mind was like complete and total vulnerability. Like you have nothing. You can't hide. You can't fight your way out of it. You are stuck at the whims and mercy of the people in front of you. And that language barrier thing you were discussing, the way I've told friends before to like try to picture it in their minds is imagine you go on a vacation or a trip with your friends to China, and you guys are going to go out and, have fun and check out all these tourist sites, try some amazing food, all these things. And then all of a sudden you're having like stroke symptoms, like you can't talk correctly and you're having all these issues, and you're all of a sudden presenting to a hospital and you don't speak Chinese. You don't know anything, especially all the medical terminology. And I asked them, I'm like, well, what do you do in that situation? And some of them say, oh, well, you use your phone. Oh, well, you do this. Okay, but what if your phone isn't working? Like, what if you don't have good data? Like,
they're missing the feeling, though. Even though you're going to use those technologies
in a foreign country, your phone probably will not be working.
Even if it works, it's the feeling that you have to go through this thing, like you were talking about earlier, Brandon. You have to go through this device, and it's the frustration level of not being understood. That whole thing of, you take it for granted because I speak, you understand, you talk to me. Now I speak, you don't understand. There's another thing that comes in. So you presented one case, Manny, that it was interesting. It was like almost like the answer, and then Brandon went back one step before presented the dilemma, the difficulty, whatever you want to call it. So look at the thing that family gave you something to enter into when Brandon talked about how everything is stripped away from you. So we as chaplains give them something that they can come enter into, right? So it's either creating something, bridging a gap where in this frustration, in this inability to be understood or to be heard or to fully be accepted as whatever they are, whoever they are, wherever they're from, I believe the chaplain's job is to bring comfort. And yes, the hospital won't publish 85 languages of the rosary, but the chaplain might go to the computer and find the Creole one and print it out for that one person that one time. The chaplain might go and do his due diligence in whatever he needs to do to make that one patient feel well. Well, the hospital or the whole staff is not going to do that. I think that first mention of what you said is we always enter into or create something for them to enter into to be able to bridge a gap between us, them, and the medical staff. And then when we do that, there's a layer of one, I feel a little dignity. There's one layer of something of my identity I received still back from what was taken from me because of the hospital, what Brandon was talking about, how clothes are gone, the room is never locking, you're a number, that you're always getting scanned, this, that, the other thing. we make something, we present something, we sit with them in this moment where one piece is given back. And I think I was telling someone the other day who someone was. There was someone that went with me, and I was telling the nurses. I said I gave them the gift of autonomy.
Mm,
And it's a silly thing to say in a way if you tell them that, because the fact that I told this guy, sure, I'll leave in his place that he feels that's not his, right? In this alien room, he was allowed to tell someone to go away. He
mhm,
can't tell the doctor to go away. He can't tell the nurses to go away for the most part. He can yell at them, but they're going to be there.
mhm.
They'll call security. We're not going to call security for the most part. We're not going to do that. That's what I'm telling. We give them that little thing of, I guess, dignity, autonomy, and control. Something that's taken away. And this cultural context are the same thing. I think creating that, which gives them a little bit of space to sit in, is a beautiful thing.
Well, and I'm gonna dig deeper on that one because I think what you're bringing up is so true, and there's a lot there. I'm really curious in because I think with this focus on different cultures, right? And we've hinted at language a number of times now, but I think there is something there what you're describing. What is it like to give care to somebody who doesn't share that same language as you? I mean, and I mean, I don't want you to just say, "Oh, well, we just use an interpreter and that fixes it." But what is it like when you're doing that? I mean, you gave a perfect example earlier, that Aztec Mayan language, dilemma where we don't have the words for this. I'm sorry. Like, what do you do in those instances? Like, how do you help somebody who unfortunately, you just can't connect with on the vocal level? What do you do? I'm curious. Like, how do you support that?
So for me, I think it happens different ways. Like if I know ahead of time what it is that I'm doing, like it's not a trauma situation and I just, I'm not learning on the fly. If it's already like an established patient, you know, as I'm walking in the hallways, I'm typically praying. One of the prayers I say probably, I don't know, 100 or more times a week is, Lord, go before me. Just go before me. Do what we can, do what I can't, and then while I'm there, I am actively listening to what the person is saying or what they are not saying, like interpreting their body language and like what is happening, what is going on, or like, for example, I'm with our social worker, um, and we go into a room together. And I go into the room together because she's a lady and the person that is in the room is a lady and this is a Muslim lady. And that's going to make her more comfortable, that there is not just me and her in the room. So that's one thing, just understanding or having a idea of their culture. And if I don't, there is Google and you can look up most things today and get a handle on that thing, and then understanding of what is their faith background, can we accommodate that in some way, like what Levon was saying, can we go print off, um, the rosary in Creole or in, Mandarin or in a language we don't necessarily have in the chapel, but we can go find it, or bringing them a Quran that's in Arabic instead of in English because they don't speak or read English. And so I think it's those things, just paying attention, humanizing them as, you know, um, trying your best to put yourself in their shoes. Like, what would I want in these moments if this is what me and my family were faced with? I think are just good questions to start asking yourself. And then, just have an open mind that religious care and faith-based care and spiritual care, emotional care, all those things are within our wheelhouse, but they may look drastically different from patient to patient, because patients are people and people are unique and they have very unique needs. And just because two people go through the same thing doesn't mean they're going to experience it in the same way. And that needs to be nuanced if we can. If we're able to nuance it, I would say let's do it and figure out how we care for people well, knowing that everybody's going to have different experiences from the circumstances that they're in. Yeah, that's where my thoughts go.
That's fair. Levon, how about you?
I mean, things are popping up in my head as Brandon and you were speaking. I can, even in the same religion, I can talk about Christianity, for instance. I go into a Baptist room. If they're Caucasian, it's one way, it's one flavor. I go to a Black Americans Baptist room, it's a different flavor. And you ought to be praying a little differently. Not that you shouldn't be able to pray the way you pray, but I like it's not the intention is to support them. So it's not like me going in there to tell them, I'm going to read 5 Orthodox prayers. I'm going to start with the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to go into 2 Psalms. I'm going to say the Holy Trinity 3 times, and then I'm going to say, Lord, have mercy. And so I go in there, and one of the questions is like, what? It seems stupid. Like it's almost like, what's your faith tradition? And I asked this question, and they'll say it. One time, I remember I even lifted my hand, and it wasn't even to make the cross. She was like, the one lady was like, whoa. And I was like, I stuck. I was like froze. But I know I had to complete the prayer. Certain movements and gestures are also could be accepted or not accepted. Everything we do within the framework of that room is in the going through the lens and understanding and culturally, religiously through their eyes. So I asked that question, and even as a Christian to another Christian, it's drastically different. So what I do is I'm catering. Hence, what we do is catering to support them. Well, we always talk about this very, very often as chaplains, like probably like when you go through internship, it's not my agenda. I don't have an agenda going somewhere. Let me figure out what it is that you need and how it is. And it's my due diligence to find out how that works, how their prayer system works, how they accentuate some of the words in the prayer in the Southern Baptist tradition, or get louder and get lower, the tones, or be more solemn in certain traditions. And so I had one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was a lady that wasn't speaking. She was writing things down, and it wasn't very legible, but the fact that I saw that she had that, and I started writing things down with her. For her, she started getting happy and started writing more and more. And the social worker that was with me is like, no one did that with her before. This was her chart. She was like doodling. I saw someone do, like the lady was doodling, and I said, why don't we write some stuff down? I said, how are you? Because I was talking to her. She started getting happy and writing things down. Again, I think it's just to be aware of your surroundings. That's a big part of what we can do. I'm going to miss it sometimes too. I caught it that time. The next time, I would have totally missed it. In my own mind, I would be like, yeah, I can't do anything here. I'll get frustrated. I'm supposed to be helping this person out. I don't have an answer for them. They're not speaking. What good am I here? And I think everyone, to a certain degree, people can go through that. You just got to fight and battle forward, and to be able to sit with that person in their uncomfort, discomfort, pain, or whatever they're struggling at the moment. So, yes, as a chaplain, we have feelings too. We have to sit with those feelings, and we have to be able to say, you know what, I don't feel very effective right now, and I wish I was doing something that made a little bridge to be able to connect me, them, and be able to be effective. But I think you stick it through. I would say have some discipline to be able to and sit with that person in that moment, and something will be revealed to us.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
and then when you got and when y'all were talking, like one of the things I think is also important is the posture that we enter into. Like I enter the room as a learner, like having the patient teach me about their culture or their religion or their language or what is important to them, and oftentimes I am learning stuff that I didn't know. Like this past week at work, I learned that there is a in the country of India, there is a order of Catholicism.
Yeah.
And I did not know that. It's not Roman Catholic, and it's not like the other ones I was familiar with. I was like, oh well, that's really interesting. Like I didn't know that existed.
Syro-Malabar, right?
And there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
words I can't say. Well, being honest, my mouth and tongue don't move that way. That would sound horrible if I said it. But yeah, just like, oh wow, like I didn't even know that this cultural nuance existed. What does that look like? How is that different? Are you able to express that while you're here in the hospital? What kind of barriers are you running into? How can I help you express it? Like we can figure out things. And um but yeah, Christianity, like it is a vast religion. Like there are 33, 35 different types of Baptist alone. So like I know Manny, he's just like, Lord have mercy. But there are. And so like there is a lot more intellectual work that goes into providing someone balanced, appropriate, spiritual care than what probably most of our colleagues realize. And, I do have a pretty decent knowledge. We probably all do. We're all master level degree or more, of religion. So I kind of know what I'm doing most of the time when it comes to religions. If I don't, I go look them up, but still, it takes effort to figure out how we're going to provide someone care spiritually and accommodate what we can within the hospital framework that we all work in.
For sure. Three things. One, if people are wondering why I'm making funny faces at the camera, for those that are watching, there's an active thunderstorm going on out here, and there was just this bolt of lightning that came up right when we were talking about the Syro-Malabar. So if you're curious about the Syro-Malabar, Google them. That's God's sign, very clearly. What the second point I was going to make, Brandon, what's so interesting about them is that they trace their religious lineage. I don't know if the person told you this. They'll trace their religious lineage, their founding, all the way back to St. Thomas the Apostle, because Thomas was believed to have gone to India, and it's so fascinating, so cool. India, one of the most fascinating, ethnically diverse countries, but their Catholicism's so beautiful to explore. Third thing I was going to say, what you guys have shared has been just awesome. Obviously, I think as you guys are sharing, an encounter came up in my mind that I remember so distinctly when we were working together. I remember there was a consult for a chaplain visit for a patient, and adult male, older guy. But I remember specifically on his information, it mentioned that he was Haitian Creole speaking. So I was like, okay, cool. Let me get an interpreter on the phone ready, because I don't think there were any in-person interpreters for that language at the time. I was like, let me get this set up on the phone so that way, at least I'll be able to communicate with him somehow, because I don't know Creole and like I know next to nothing of French. So I was like, let me try this. So knock on the door. I go in and I just, do a very informal greeting. Hi, sir. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. And then I have the interpreter introduce himself, and the man immediately pulled out his hand and he's like, no, like, I don't want this. And I was confused. And essentially, like, through nonverbal communication, I was able to kind of ask, like, through communication somehow, I was able to ascertain he was tired of using the phone interpreters. So it's really funny for our viewers, for people that are listening, even though nowadays we can have interpreters and like interpreters are cool to an extent, some patients hate them, just to be really clear, because you have no idea, unless you go through it yourself, what it's like for conversation flow to go when you're talking through a third person. It's the weirdest dynamic because it's not a normal flow. You have to pause, you have to wait. Are you capturing the right cues? Are you capturing the right inflections? All these different things. And while interpreters are amazing, I got to do interpretation for about 6 months in a previous life before I got into chaplaincy and things. And it's really hard to do justice as an interpreter. I give them all the credit for being factual and for getting the information, but you can never fully 100% capture the emotion, the dynamics, the things that are going on the deeper level, rather than just the words. The reason I bring this up is because this gentleman, when he shut down the phone interpreter, I said, okay. And in my head, I was thinking, well, how are we going to do this? Because I'm not going to magically learn Creole in a couple minutes. So I don't know how this is going to work. And I remember just like, Holy Spirit, if you want to give me a Pentecost moment right now, I would really love that, because good Lord, we are going to struggle right now. And
That's what I was thinking in my head, Manny. It's like,
truly,
Manny's going to speak in tongues.
Like nurses are going to come in and think I'm a drunkard, just like the apostles. Like it's going to be wild in a minute. And I just remember the gentleman like made some kind of gesture, and I could tell he basically was telling me, he's like, I actually just want you to pray. And I was like, I think I did something like this. And he just nodded his head. He's like, yes, do that. And I was like, in English. And he said, yeah, go ahead. And I was like, okay. So I just went into prayer and I mentioned his name and I just prayed, whatever was on my heart in that moment, I just prayed. And like this moment I will never forget. He started praying in his own language. He started praying in Creole, but he just started putting his hands out and almost praying over me at the same time that I was praying over him. And man, like you could feel the spirit in that room. It was unlike any other moment because I didn't fully understand the words he was saying, but just from the feeling and the sense in that room, I could tell that man was just praying for me and trying to ask God to help me in that moment. And I was praying for him, for his healing, for his needs, whatever was present for him. And I just remember at the end, after we prayed and after he finished praying over me, he thanked me, and it was a very broken thank you. We did our best that we could, but he was grateful. And I think looking back on it, I think he appreciated the effort. I think at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest takeaways I hope I want to deliver with this episode for our listeners, for anybody watching. Effort is so incredibly valuable to people that are not of our same religion or same culture or same background or anything. But when people can see that you are trying to meet them where they're at, when people can see that you are attempting your best to support them, they will meet you more than halfway. They, like this gentleman that I'm talking about now in this story, he didn't have to be nice. He didn't have to try to pray with me. He didn't have to do all these things. We could have had a pretty stale conversation over a phone interpreter. But he met me more than halfway. And then he started to pray over me. And like, it was such a beautiful moment. And I think it all started because I was willing to just go for it and try. And I didn't care if I was going to look like a fool. I didn't care at the end of the day if like it felt right or wrong. I followed his lead and trusted my gut, said a prayer, and went for it. And I think at the end of the day that the gentleman said, I'm sure if I had to think about it, I would imagine that gentleman was thinking, he gave me the best that he could, and that's all I can ask for. And I think so often in these moments, talking about my experience working with other providers and people that I've heard similar stories, we try so hard to be perfectionists that at times I think we lose sight of the person in front of us. I think we allow that cultural barrier, that language barrier, that religious barrier, whatever it might be, that difference that's in front of us, we let it become almost so imposing that rather than seeing it as a bridge, it actually becomes a wall. and we don't even make an effort to climb over that wall. We don't make an effort to try to chip through that wall. We just let it be a wall, and we don't make the connection. And I think the invitation is try, man, try. It's incredible the conversations and the fruits and the values that you can gain from having an effort to try to engage with people that are different from us. I just wanted to share that story with you guys because it was like, honestly, I didn't expect to bring it up in today's episode, but it just came to my mind as you guys were talking, and I was like, man, that's actually like a perfect connection with everything we've been talking about today.
That was a beautiful example of what we've been talking about today. You taking the time and bridging a gap, even when there's obstacles that one couldn't go. He stopped you from using that which we use to be able to bridge that gap, but you stayed anyway, and you were able to make a connection. That's caring. That's staying. That's being of compassion and seeing beyond those things that you said. You want to go over that wall. You want to chip through that wall. That's beautiful. Thank you for that share.
Oh, thank you guys. I wanna shift it now for a moment. You know, we've talked about, I think, the languages, and we talked a little bit about some of the cultures. I'm curious for you guys, like in those faith stories, we've engaged them and touched on them in different ways, in different aspects today. But like, what has it been like for you guys? Because obviously, I'm Catholic. Brandon, I know you're Baptist. Levon, obviously, you are Orthodox. We obviously do not encounter every single day Catholic, Orthodox, Baptist patients in every single encounter. Because if we did, that would be so boring, one, but also two, that's just not reflected in our world. That's not reality. So I'm curious for you guys, like what is it like in those moments when you recognize, like, I am a person of this faith, of this creed, of this belief system? What is it like entering and ministering to somebody who is different from you in that sense, or who doesn't hold necessarily the same religious convictions, beliefs, and values that, you know, you're guiding your life by? I'm really curious what that's like for you guys.
I wanted to mention something on the same vein as what you said before with
Oh,
the.
go for it.
So I went into a room and they were Vietnamese speaking, and I know a lot of the culture, Vietnamese culture, because I had a lot of friends from that area, the foods, the traditions, but I don't speak Vietnamese. And there was an older gentleman there, and I think he was a nephew. He was sitting right by the bedside, and he spoke a little broken English. And he said, "Can you pray?" And I said, "Do you want me to use an interpreter? Because I don't." And he goes, "No, God will do the interpreting for us."
Whoa.
And
Wow.
and that's the one I told Brandon about that. He told me about that, and I said, that caught me off. I was like, "Whoa." God, like usually you get like, yeah, use an interpreter, and it's like it's tough. Like you were talking about, man. It's like saying a 3-4 words, stopping, trying to get your. It's good, but it's not easy. And this guy's like, yeah, let God will interpret everything for all of us. You pray. I said, okay. And that was a very powerful one. That he had faith in all seriousness. It wasn't like a joke. God, it'll reach him. God, and again, this was like me trying to figure what he was saying. Just pray, pray. So okay, I
Man,
forgot about that. Thank you, Brandon.
that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, what a
Yeah.
like total trust in God's
Mhm.
power in that moment.
Yep.
Really.
Yeah. Probably one of, so this is off subject a little bit because it's not chaplaincy, but probably one of the most profound experiences in my life was when I was a teenager and I took a missions trip to China. And one of the people that was on the team, he was Chinese, and he spoke Mandarin. He spoke English as well, but he also spoke Mandarin. And when it came to prayer, when it came to when we were praying, he prayed in Mandarin. And I remember just this having this profound effect on me of like, huh, I've lived in America my whole life, spoke English, everybody around me speaks English. I had never really like heard like language that way in prayer before. And it just dawned on me that like the vastness of God, like that, yeah, God doesn't require interpreters. Like, all knowing, yeah, that's really a thing. Like it was just this aha moment when I was a teenager. Um, but yeah. Sorry, Minnie, what was your question? I feel like we're off topic, but
You guys, no, we're not. We're not. No, there. I don't think in our podcast we are ever off topic. It all connects.
that's funny.
No, it's the question going back earlier was for you guys, like when you are going into a room of somebody of a different faith or religion or background, like what is that like for you guys? Like what is the experience of being somebody who, I mean, all of us are Christian, all of us hold to certain like Christian beliefs that I think are universally held by all of us in some capacity. What is it like when you enter a room with somebody who doesn't hold those beliefs or who holds something different? What is that experience like? I'm curious. Talking about kind of all these diversity, these aspects of our diverse patient populations we deal with.
I think for me, I go back to that idea of um before I came to working in level 1 trauma center, I was a chaplain at a state-run institution that supported people that had mental and physical disabilities. And one of the things I found really, really surprising about doing that work is how well that sect of population handles disease. Because oftentimes they don't necessarily know the severity of what it is that they have. Like, take cancer, for example. That population isn't necessarily going to understand what it means culturally to have cancer and how scary that can be. And because of that, their patient outcomes of well-being are far better than what we would consider someone to be of normal intelligence or of normal mobility. Mobility, yeah, make sure I said mobility and not nobility. But normal mobility. And so whenever I am in those type of environments, I really do try to be a learner, or a student. Like what can I provide and what can I take away? What can I learn? What do I not know about, like with a Catholic family that are, culturally Indian. I didn't know um that existed before meeting Manny. I didn't know that there was Catholic priests that got married. Didn't know that because the only lived experience I've had is with Roman Catholics and not the variety or flavors of Catholicism that there are. Just like me and the Protestant lane that I run in and trying to figure out where I'm going to stake my claim and what camp I'm going to be in. Don't know. It's to be continued usually.
I know.
But I know. But I think it's a beautiful thing, the vastness of humanity. And I was having this, conversation with a fellow colleague the other day. Like when we look at Genesis, when we look at creation, like there are all different kinds of birds. There are all different kinds of fish. There are all different kinds of cats and dogs and whatever, that God allows so much nuance in creation and so much variety. And then we have this weird thing when it comes to humanity that we would expect God to not do that the same way. Like that, like, no, look at Genesis and look at God's plan, look at how he did what he did. Humanity is meant to be in a variety of colors and shapes and sizes and cultures, and then how do we work within that? How do we figure that out? How do we accommodate what we can in the healthcare environment? So that would be my thing, just to enter in as a learner. I don't have all the answers, nor do I expect myself to have all the answers. I'm human. I'm Brandon. I'm not Jesus. I'm not going to have all the answers. And I will do all that I can, to help you have personhood and advocacy and accommodate your faith background within this place that we call a hospital, and hopefully you're being discharged and in better health than when you came in here. But yeah, I think a posture of a learner or a student is where it needs to be, not only for what the work we do, but really the work for anybody, to come into a person's room or to want to be culturally sensitive to what they do. Like, one example that comes to mind is like back in my residency, we had this family that was Orthodox Jewish. So, they kept kosher, no pork, nothing like that. And one of the members of the family was having to have a valve replaced in their heart. Well, those valves come from pigs. And so I was like, hello, Orthodox Jewish. I don't think that's going to go over well. And we should probably tell the family, to make sure they're going to be okay with that, and to see if there's another option on the table of how we can maybe do something else. Because I just, and then my mind also goes to what you said, Manny, about, give them your best, give them all that you can. Don't hold back because there's barriers in place. Like, we figure out how to get around barriers all the time. That's what we do in healthcare. And this shouldn't be any different. And usually I think the more information people have, the more accommodating they are. Like, if they know that, like, you're being upfront and honest and telling them what they need to know for them to make informed decisions, then they will hopefully make that informed decision well, but also be thankful for the information that you didn't withhold from them.
Yeah, for sure. Your point on always being a learner, I mean, that's one of the things I always joke with or not really joke, but really, I mean, I say with my colleagues is whenever they're like, you're the expert, and I'm like, oh gosh, guys, I'm like, I will work on figuring it out with you all. But in my head, I'm like, no, I'm certified. Like, I have the credentials, I have the things, but I don't have every answer. That's a crazy idea to believe that I have every answer. And if you encounter a chaplain that has all the answers, run as fast as you can, because that person is now God, and that's scary. But I honestly think, to me, it's like, if we don't have true humility in this work, in this profession, and you really do think, oh, there's an answer for this, it's in this scripture, or, oh, in Catholic perspective, like, oh, St. Thomas Aquinas has the answer in this part, in this paragraph, and you've lost your mind when doing pastoral care. Like, it is never that straightforward. So absolutely, like, being a learner, being a constant student of life, it's essential to doing what we're doing, for sure. Levon, how about you? What were your thoughts on that one?
I would definitely agree with what Brandon was saying, and I was thinking along the lines of, like, when the chances are given, be courageous, meaning be able to do those things which might feel uncomfortable, but you still should do it. And I can only give you an example by what I've done. I baptized a Buddhist because they wanted to be baptized on their deathbed. They had cancer. It was a mother's friend, my friend's mother, and she asked for it. And it was by figuring out that she, like, I saw a dream, and Christ was came to me, and that was the first day, and I was like, wow. I talked to her. A couple of days had gone by, and I'm sitting there, and my friend's girlfriend's Catholic. It's me and my wife, and my friend's mother, one that has cancer, and she kept talking about it, like, when I see him, and in my life, when I go, what I see. I said, "Do you want to be like?" They both look at me like, "I think she wants to be baptized. I think she wants to be with." I said, "Do you want to be a Christian? Do you want to be with God, like Christian? Do you want to? You want Christ in your life before, like, piecing things together, like, slowly." I didn't go into theological work, but yeah. And I said, "You know what? Give me the bottle of avian water right now, and do what you have to do." Hence, being courageous in that moment. Obviously, when not just go and do whatever you want, but when it leads that way, instead of saying, "Well, this is not right," they're booted, or whatever. If it was opposite or reverse, do that too. It's for them. It's for their peace. And so I would agree with the posture of being a learner, a student, being a student, what's going on, and then also adding one piece to that, which is being like, I'm going to be courageous and whatever it needs to be, like you were, Manny, in that situation, like, and you were, Brandon, in your situation. I think it calls for it, because it's not us, it's them, and how we're making them feel at the end of the day. And that little bit of push would help them. You were talking about it, Brandon. Give them their dignity. That's it.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Levon. I think, it's funny when you're answering a question on, like, how do you enter a space as a chaplain with people that are religiously different from you. I think it would be counterintuitive to answer like follow Jesus's example, but I'm going to go with that as my answer. I think for me, like, I honestly do lean on the example of Christ in the Gospels, specifically in two ways. One, Christ at no point says only this group of people are allowed to enter and be with me in these areas. Like, only the Jews or only the Romans or only these groups of people can follow me. Everyone that was interested, curious, had a fascination. Like, even that weren't believers, but were like, I'm hearing about all these miracles. Like, what's happening? Jesus never at any point said, you are gone, like casting you out. You are not welcome here. They were allowed to witness. Like, they were allowed to see the things. Did they believe? We don't have every evidence of like every single person that witnessed Jesus if they believed or not. We don't have it. We don't have the textual for it. But I find that so interesting that Jesus at no point said, unless you like believe this specifically, you can no longer follow me in his earthly life. Obviously, we know the theology and things like that. But I find it so interesting that in his earthly ministry, he kept the invitation open. And I think that's something really important with the people that I meet with that are different from me. They're not lesser. Like, I don't cast them out because they're different from me. They were also, in my theology, they were created in God's image and likeness, and they should be loved and cared for and treated in the same way that an amazing Christian, Catholic, Orthodox believer should absolutely be treated with the dignity and respect that God has ordered for that person. Like, it doesn't matter to me if you're a Muslim, if you're an atheist, if you're a Wiccan. Like, at the end of the day, you are loved by God. And it is my duty and my calling to be the loving presence of God that God has ordered me to in that moment of encounter with you. I also think to myself too, what's really funny is when I have described my job to people in the Catholic world who are like, so working in perinatal palliative care, right? Like, unfortunately, I deal with either dead babies or babies that are very medically complex and may possibly die. That's just the reality of the work we deal with. And often with my friends in the Catholic world, what's so funny and interesting is they will often ask, well, did you baptize this baby? Did you baptize this baby that's really like scary or really complex? And I just look at them funny and I'm like, no, like, did the parents ask for that? And they're like, but you have to, like, what about their salvation? What about all these things? Like, and I answer and I say, those are legitimate concerns that I invite you to pray about and consider and think about. But I say, in that moment, that's not my job. In that moment, I am not required to do that. I am required to be with that family, to offer support, to be available. I am not the baptizing guy. That is not my job. And it's funny because they look at me funny. But how many times did Christ force people to go get baptized? How many times did Christ force people to be in his ministry and say, you have to do this right now at this very moment? It didn't happen a whole lot, guys. He did challenge people to believe in him. He did challenge people to follow certain commands and certain teachings, but he never forced, because God believes in freedom at the end of the day as well, which is a theological concept I would love to explore one day on the pod. But anyway, I think to me, that has been one of the most challenging but beautiful parts of my work as well, is that I am honoring the freedom that God has given to all of us when I am working with people of different faith backgrounds as well, right? Just because they don't hold the same beliefs as me, it doesn't mean I have to impose. It doesn't mean I have to force them into my belief system. I'm not called to that in that moment. And I think that is something that I would really, it's going to be our next topic, but I really want to encourage listeners and viewers is, like, you don't have to forcibly convert everyone to make it to heaven and to help people get to heaven. That's not always the calling every single moment. I'm going to give one quick example and then I want to invite you guys to explore. But the other day was really interesting. We had a baby who was so medically complex, just really, really knocking at death's door. And two young parents, really, really beautiful young people, younger than me. And I remember asking, I said, would it be meaningful to you guys to have either like a blessing or a baptism for this baby? And dad is Catholic and mom is Christian of some kind, but not, it didn't feel necessary for her and her belief system that the baby had to be baptized per se. But dad shared that as a Catholic, it was meaningful and important for him for baby to be baptized. And I asked mom, I said, Mom, how do you feel about that? Like, what are your thoughts? Is that something you're comfortable with? Is that something you would be okay with as well? And she shared with me, my only concern is if our baby does survive and my baby does get baptized, will my baby be allowed to go to the same Christian church that myself and my family go to? And I was like, wow. I had never heard that question or that thought before. And I don't know what overcame me, but I just told her, I said, Mom, I'm going to be honest with you. In my Christian church, you would be more than welcomed. And if for whatever reason your Christian church does not welcome baby after he or she is baptized, I will personally give you my card. You call me, and we will find you a Christian church that is welcoming and loving and wants to have your baby be part of that community. Because that shouldn't be an impediment for your baby to be welcomed and loved in a beautiful Christian community. And I remember at that point for her, she said, okay, I want baptism. I'm okay with my baby being baptized. And the reason I bring up that story is because it wasn't a priority for her faith background. It wasn't the most important thing. It was more for dad, but it wasn't for her. But the thing that motivated or led her to want to have that done is because she wanted community. She wanted her baby to feel loved. She wanted her baby to be welcomed. And what's so interesting is that transcends just faith. Like, that transcends any organized specific religion. That's something deeper. That's a value. That's a virtue from God, is that charity and that love that come from him alone. So I bring that up to say, it's easy to get very lost in all the theology and the dogmas and the teachings and all these different things. But at the end of the day, we are dealing with human people that are different from us. And what's stopping us from being fully loving with them? I think that's kind of where I'm falling, or not falling, but where I'm landing right now when we're discussing this topic. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts real quick on that before we make our next transition. But if not, that's also okay. All right, we'll jump into our last thing then. Before we go, for you guys, I would love for you guys to explore, as we're getting ready to wrap up, what are encouragements you would give to people, our listeners, people that hopefully we, as our viewers and listeners, can share this podcast with a friend, somebody who might benefit and grow from this, hearing this. What are words of encouragement, advice, suggestions you would give to people who, you know what, they're dealing with people of diverse backgrounds, or like for whatever reason they want to go out and explore and like encounter people of different cultures, backgrounds, faiths, whatever it might be? What's your advice to them? What is your suggestion? And it doesn't have to be people that are going to do chaplaincy per se. It can be like one of my friends that recently subscribed. He's a lawyer. He's going to be a lawyer soon. Maybe he could benefit from hearing this. Like, what do you recommend? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your guys' takes on this.
So what I would say is that different is not wrong, evil, or bad unnecessarily. Like, just because, I like something and you don't, or that's not something that I do in my culture and you do that in your culture, doesn't mean that that's a wrong thing or a bad thing or an evil thing. And things can be different without us assigning moral codes to them. And I have not had a lot of, like, where I live now and where I work now is probably one of the most diverse environments that I've worked in, outside of my residency, because my residency was also at a level 1 trauma center, where we had, people just being very, people came from all over the world to have surgeries where I did my residency. So that would probably be my advice overall, or just my thought overall, is that different doesn't necessarily mean wrong, bad, or evil. It's just different. And sometimes those things are really fun to explore. Like as I have explored different restaurants from where we've lived, and when I've had the opportunity to go overseas, I really enjoy other cultures' food. Like, because Levon he would know what I'm talking about. I asked him a couple weeks ago. It was like, when I was over in Turkey, I had this, bread, lamb, red sauce. And I'm like, it was delicious, but I have no idea what it was because I don't speak Turkish. Of course, Levon does, because he speaks, 20 different languages. But I know I'm exaggerating, but you do speak a lot of languages. You speak more than I do. I'm probably the only one on the podcast that is not multilingual. I can kind of sort of know some ASL, but that's about the extent of what I can pull off. But yeah, I would say, different isn't necessarily wrong or bad. And how this has really showed up for me is that, like, I have pretty profound dyslexia, and that's just an everyday thing for me. And sometimes it makes life, interesting, especially when I'm charting or when I'm trying to figure out how to move quickly through, spelling something or whatever. But that isn't wrong. It isn't evil. It isn't bad. It's just part of who I am. And, I think that is where we need to start, is like have a common humanity and figure out where somebody's coming from and understand their culture as best you can, knowing that you're not going to know everything and they're not going to know everything about your culture, and they can come with you to have a barbecue and have hamburgers and hot dogs and fries, because that's very American. And then you can go with them and don't know, try sushi or try something that is very different from what you're used to, and just, go from there. And then, sure, if there are things that we're going to figure out, like, oh, like this might not be good, just be open and honest about how you feel and where you're coming from and what you think. And I think you can be both courageous in those moments and say those things like Levon was talking about, and still have dignity and respect for the other person, that you're just not comfortable doing that. But yeah, I would, and then going back to what you said, Manny, I would be very interested to know, you probably don't, but what denomination she came from, or what mom was talking about. I mean, I don't expect you to say her church's name on the podcast and out them, but
I don't even
just
remember.
like I had never run into that either. I was like, that's new information. Like now I want to go look up where that would land, because I mean, even as somebody that's Protestant and not, I'm not Orthodox, I'm not Catholic, I'm not Methodist, I'm not Anglican, all kind of the denominations that practice infant baptism, but I still don't think that that would prevent somebody from having community, especially if that child grows up, like they didn't choose that was a choice of their parents. So why are you holding them responsible for that choice? But that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, that's what I'm going to go down to, is just different isn't wrong, bad, or evil necessarily.
Absolutely. Levon, what's your take on that? What's your advice or your suggestions?
So, because it transcends just chaplaincy, and our viewers could be from all different vocations and professions, I think people want to share their traditions and culture and food and language. So I think if you have a little bit of, you could push by the unease of something that's different, just sit with it and you'll learn a lot. As you were speaking, I was recalling my childhood and how, I grew up in a multicultural environment in Philadelphia, and specifically, going to high school. I've been in a Sikh temple, I've been in a Buddhist temple, I've been at a mosque, I've been all these different places. And I think just by sitting around, I've been to West African parties and being able to, for weddings, someone comes necessarily, and it just happens to be that there's always that one person that comes and tries to tell you a little bit about something and tries to have you in. And if you're able, like Brandon said, to be that listener, to that learner, to utter a word or two, or to be able to try one thing that's different from what you usually try, but then also be comfortable to say no, yes, whatever, I don't feel. I think the main thing is to be able to sit past that unease of being in this totally different environment where you're the only thing that's not fitting. I think you can make a change. You can make a change in them, and you can make a change in you after you feel comfortable. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I love that. I think the key takeaway for me for like advice is like educate, and just like Brandon mentioned earlier, like be a student, like don't give up on that. My example connecting to chaplaincy, but it was through an outside way, is, I don't know, I think it's silly, but it's funny. When I was in grad school and doing work, my schoolwork and stuff there, I had a crush on a girl who was from Morocco. So man, I learned all about Moroccan culture, learned all about all the stuff. It was, and Morocco, I mean, nothing ever happened with this girl, but it was still so interesting.
There was an incentive.
There was an incentive, exactly. But it's like, it was so cool too, because I learned so many interesting things about Morocco. It was fascinating. Like, it was just very, very good information. And then it was funny because one of the families we ended up getting consulted on in my perinatal work here at the hospital, we had a family who was from Morocco. And so I got to meet them, and just very lovely people, amazing. And it was really funny because at one point their English was flawless. Never would have guessed at all that they were like, from Morocco. And I remember asking them at one point, I said, do you guys speak, other languages? And they said, yeah. And I said, I understand you guys are Moroccan. Do you guys speak Darija? And they looked at me with the biggest eyes, and they're like, you know what that is? And I was like, yeah, I've learned. Like, yeah, I know what that is. And they're like, no one knows what that is. We just tell people we speak Arabic because that's easier for them. And I said, oh no, I know, like it's similar, but it's different. And like, it's a unique expression. And they're like, they were just enthralled. Like, they were so grateful that someone knew something about them, like a part of their culture, a part of their life experience. And I think that's my encouragement for people that are from, that are wanting to engage in this work or wanting to make better connections with their neighbors, is like, the more you learn about somebody from a different place or different region, I think the greater ability to connect with them and the greater ability they'll feel like you care about them. Those two things will be so interconnected and so valuable and meaningful to them. I think it's part of our expression of love at the end of the day, and I think it shows that you care. So yeah, I mean, like, that would be my encouragement, is like, don't stop learning. Find a way. Like, if you do connect with somebody, let's say from, like, I don't know, Nigeria or Bangladesh or even Australia, like somewhere random, like, do a little bit of homework, a quick Google search, something, like, find something interesting. Because, man, you have no idea what kind of opening, what kind of conversation you can have. And at the end of the day, that person, like, taking it back to our Christian chaplain perspective, you may be Christ to them in that moment. And you have no idea if that person, at the end of the day, they could say, it really felt like for the first time, God saw me. God spoke with me. It felt like God was with me in that moment. And man, it was a simple moment of like, I know your language, or I know this one fun fact, or I know this something. And you might be opening up the spirit of encounter there. So just my encouragement for our listeners, I think, don't buy textbooks. You don't have to, like, be the expert on every country, nothing like that. But just the little things, those can make a huge difference at the end of the day, I think. So yeah, guys, this was an awesome conversation. I think I learned some
Manny,
great things from y'all. Go for it.
before we wrap,
Yeah.
just for those that are like in chaplaincy or those that are in healthcare, I do think it's important to say, if you are a chaplain, it is your job to advocate for your patients' spiritual and emotional and faith well-being in the room. That's what we do. And then for those that aren't, in chaplaincy, but they are in healthcare, I would say every facet of that person's health is vitally important.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's not your lane, because you're a nurse, and you're doing procedures and vitals and medications and wound dressings and all the stuff that nurses do, or you're a doctor or a surgeon and this is your lane and you're thinking, medical care outcomes and what surgeries they need and what this is and what that is. Still, it is our job as healthcare professionals to provide for whole person care. And that is what we all need to be focused on at the end of the day. Like, if a patient tells me they're thirsty, I step outside the room, I get the nurse, hey, can they have water? Like, are they NPO? What are we doing? What are we not doing? And if I'm able, like, if the nurse is like, yeah, they can have water, I go get them water because that's their need. That's what they need in that moment. And that has nothing to do with spiritual care or emotional care other than, providing them dignity because they can't necessarily get out of bed and do it themselves.
That does have something to do with spiritual care. You're right.
True.
But it does.
True. It does. It does. You're right. But I think that's also important to say, like, every part of a person's healthcare is vitally important. And we need to start putting spiritual care and emotional care on the same level as those other aspects because it affects outcomes. And a person will be very much better off having their spirit and their emotions cared for, along with the health of their body, than they would be to not have those things cared for.
It's like I said at the beginning of the episode, Brandon, like when people come to the hospital, they come for care. No matter what country, what world, what place they're from, they're coming for care. And let's give them the best experience possible in all its facets. Not just the physical, but all the other components. Absolutely. Absolutely. Lavon, any concluding thoughts from you? You're good? Awesome. Guys, this was such a great episode. Truly, I appreciate y'all so much for this one. Hopefully we'll get back to another episode soon again. But thank you to our listeners and all those who were watching. As always, please like, comment, share. If you know someone who you think would benefit from this, or who really is in that world of just, man, I'm meeting diverse people, diverse groups in every single day of my work or every place I'm going to, I really think this would be a great episode to share with that person. And hopefully our words and our stories are able to connect and resonate in some way with you guys. As always, please keep us in your prayers. We will continue to pray for you all. And those of you who are supporting us, we thank you so much for everything you're doing. And yeah, like I said, we're hopefully going to come out with another episode soon. But thank you guys again, truly, for all that you do for us.
In 2 weeks, sir? Manny,
Hopefully,
in
yeah,
2 weeks?
hopefully,
Yeah.
if God wills, yeah.
Yeah, God willing, but I think it's
That's our goal.
Okay.
Yeah, we're trying to get back into a 2-week cycle. I don't make promises on that because life is never a guarantee for anything. But
yeah,
keep your eyes out. Don't forget to click the bell on your notifications on YouTube. Podcast language, I'm learning. But that way you get notified whenever a new episode drops, and then that way, you can stay in touch and keep us well supported, but also hopefully continue to gain wisdom, knowledge, and all the other things you need during this time. So again, thank you all so much for everything. We appreciate you all so much, and God bless everyone, and God bless you guys. Thank you for being with us today. Okay.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, guys.